If you, as you are right now, were transported into Super Mario 64, do you think you could beat it? Could you even swim well enough to get a single star in Jolly Roger Bay? Could you soar among the skies with the wing cap? Would you even be able to complete Princess Peach's slide, which may actually end up being more difficult than you would anticipate? And finally, could you find any way to actually defeat Bowser? Picking up from last time, we have 10 stars, and you can find our stats of the quote-unquote average human in the description down below. Before we head into Jolly Roger Bay, we need to establish a couple things, a couple advantages that Mario has that we, unfortunately, would not. Probably the largest of which would simply be that coins give Mario oxygen, and I've never actually tried to inhale a coin, but I don't think it would end up well for us. This means that in my personal opinion, we would have no way to obtain any stars in Jolly Roger Bay. Now there are a couple that might be possible if you are absolutely fantastic at swimming, or if you have, inhuman ability to hold your breath. We'll get to those in a little bit, but honestly, it is not looking good. With my rough estimates, the bottom of the area here that we can swim down to is about 150 feet. Essentially, all I did was take Mario's rough height, and then I noticed that whenever he swims down with one of his, paddles, I don't know exactly what it's called, but whenever he's going down, he goes about his body length. Given we know that Mario is 5 feet, this puts us at about 150 feet straight down. Given that we have no diving gear, the average human would not be able to physically exert themselves enough to swim completely down and into the hole with enough oxygen. I suppose maybe you could grab onto something very, very heavy and then just hold your breath as long as... Actually, that could work. Now that I'm really thinking about it, you might be able to find some sort of way to get something that would normally sink down to the bottom. The average human can hold their breath for a minute and a half. I think is about the average, minute 15, minute and a half with no exertion. Now underwater that might be a little bit different, but if you're just hanging on to something, might be able to make it all the way to the 3rd star. So I guess if we take a page out of the Mafia playbook and, use some sort of weight to make sure that he's swimming with the fishes, we might be able to get the 3rd star, but later on we'll be able to get the metal cap. I'm not really sure how that's going to work out, so that would be the weight that we would need, and we'd be able to at least get that 1 star. If you want any other stars in the area, you'd first have to get into the ship. You would have to figure out how to get the eel out of the way, which I still to this day have no idea how that actually works. I just kind of swim around him until he gets, tired of me being a gnat in his face and moves on. Usually that results in me taking some damage, which if he bit you, you're probably dead, or he could just hold you underwater. So doing this would be very risky, but, if you just waited for a time when he left on his own accord, then maybe you could manage it. One of the main problems that I see is while you could, get some air from the top of the ship and then maybe swim back down and hit 1 chest, we wouldn't be able to use the air bubbles like Mario does. What, are you supposed to just breathe into the air bubble? That's a very video game thing that I don't think that we would be able to do. If you know how to do that, let me know, I guess. That would be a very interesting skill to have, very niche, but, hey, if it can be done, it can be done. As the water drains, unfortunately, the entire bottom of the ship becomes very slippery. Now, there is a solution to this. We could just wait for it to dry. I don't know how long that would take. Maybe upwards of a couple days, if it even did, as the area around is still very moist. But, maybe we could take our shirt off or something and rub it along the side or something and maybe make it less slippery. And I feel like we could manage to get the star, assuming we could drain the boat, but I don't see that one happening. So just to tally up what I personally believe we could do in this area, I think we would be able to get the chest star in the cave, the 3rd star. And I don't think we'd be able to get any other stars, either because we need to lift the boat before we have access to them, or we can't access the cannon, because as awkward as it is, we can't actually make this jump here. And I don't see any other way that we can maybe get this platform to ramp up to it. Maybe we could work something out, by putting something heavy on the other side and use it as as leverage to get us on the other side. But either way, that only opens the cannon, and cannons are pretty dubious at best in this challenge, so it's not like that would solve all of our problems, but we're thinking here. And next I'd like to move on to the wing cap, and Originally, I was completely of the mind that this was a complete bust, we weren't going to be able to do anything with it, but now that we have 1-ups in the picture, it's very possible that we would be able to eventually figure out how this wing cap worked logistically. Does that give us the ability to fly? Does it make us lighter to the point where we are able to fly? Or does it simply just fly from the head and your head's essentially trying to fly off of your body the entire time you have it on? Now, I'm going to assume that it just gives us the ability to fly, the ability to glide, and that we would probably be able to use it as it is a magical item. The only problems that I could see are maybe needing something to cover your mouth. It's pretty difficult to breathe, like if you stick your head out of a car window, it can be difficult to breathe at that point, so maybe, you know, like some kind of a mouth cover or something. I'm relatively confident that we'd be able to glide onto the tower and hit the wing cap switch, but any advanced maneuvers at this point would likely be very difficult, not to mention the fact that we are essentially thrown unknowingly into this situation. We're started in the air. There's no, you know, training on how to use this thing. They just start you up in the sky and say, hey, figure it out. With that in mind, I would definitely recommend bringing a 1-up into this area. Kind of makes me wonder, do we eat the 1-ups, or do we just kind of have them in our pack and have to use them when we're close to death? Not really sure how that works. I would assume you just kind of eat them or absorb them into your body somehow, and then you just get a free pass. Yeah, we don't really see him actually using them. They just kind of work. Either way, with a little bit of practice, I think you could get the red coin star here. You can kind of just glide around super gentle to grab the red coins and then onto the platform with a switch as well. That'll bring our star count up to 11, assuming we are not getting any of the stars in Jolly Roger Bay just yet. I'm not 100% sure on the concept of like riding things down, you know, sinking to the bottom with other objects, but it could work actually. But for now, we're not going to count it. Next we come to Princess Peach's Slide, and this one actually is a lot more divisive than I thought it was going to be. You see, in the beginning, it's just a slide. No big deal. But we have to take into consideration specifically this one giant turn that is right after a massive downhill. So you're picking up speed and then you're immediately needing to turn right. I actually put out a poll that I think it was like 70% of people said that you could not make this turn IRL, which kind of made me wondering, like, how in the world would we navigate this? And the only thing I can think of is, depending on what kind of material the slide is made out of, you might be able to slow yourself down, you know, either with your hands, just anything that would be able to create a little bit of extra friction. I don't think you could make this turn at a super high speed, but I do believe that you would be able to slow yourself enough to just kind of walk the rest of the track. And if you could slow yourself down fast enough and then pick up speed fast enough, you might actually be able to get the star for doing it quickly as well. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think you would be able to manage it. Time is pretty lenient. You don't have to be, you know, going super fast the entire time, but it is something you have to be careful with. So I'm going to go ahead and say that these would be stars 12 and 13. Next, as we're covering some of the shorter areas in the game, I wanted to tackle Bowser 1, Bowser in the Darkness? What is it called? Bowser in the Dark World. Bowser in the Darkness. One of the main problems that I see with Bowser in the Dark World is that you're actually thrown in from pretty high distance as you are falling from the trapdoor. Even if we just assume that you're not falling the entire distance of the course in here, as would be implied, if we only assume that you're falling the amount of distance that it shows that you are, that's still a good 50-60 foot drop. Maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit, but either way, if you land wrong on that, you're injured for the entire stage, which is a pretty big deal right off the bat. Suppose there's a possibility maybe we could grab a wing cap from Bob-omb Battlefield and potentially bring it in here to ease our fall, but I wasn't going to count that against us anyway. We have plenty of problems aside from that. Now, everything up to the staircase would be pretty tricky. You could probably manage to do just about everything in this area. You have to watch out for the enemies. The amps, would essentially tase you, and put you out of commission for a little bit. Might stop your heart. Not entirely sure, but either way, they're easily avoidable. Just don't go in their orbit, and you're probably fine. With good platforming and a little bit of, I guess you'd call it jank at the very end before the staircase, I think the best way to navigate this obstacle right here, getting up to the switch that activates the staircase, I think the best way to do this would be to kind of run up and sort of brace yourself against the wall. You would theoretically be able to throw yourself over and grab the ledge there It would be a bit tricky, especially if you're not, trained in that way, but you'd be learning pretty quick. This would extend our jump height by probably actually more than enough to make most of the jumps in here possible. But this is the only one that we'd actually have too much of an issue with. I kind of just thought of it. I was watching some free running videos. I thought those were super interesting. And I realized that they were doing, this sort of tech, and I was like, hey, we can use that in the video. And that brings us to potentially the largest roadblock that we've had in the entire series so far. And it is this very unassuming staircase. You see, this is an incredibly slippery surface. And if we want to make it up, we're going to have to hit this switch here and activate these stairs. Problem being, we're most likely not fast enough to make it up here. It's always a little bit close. Just close enough that if you go just fast enough, just might be able to make it. But I don't think there's any way for a human to make it up there in that time, at least not the average human, not given the stats that we're dealing with. And there are two ways that we can approach this obstacle. Either we can assume that we would be able to get our fingers or, like a stick or something into the gaps between where the staircases come up, and we might be able to make it up that way. But if we assume that this is far too slippery to navigate even with some assistance of another item, we have the option to either stack maybe, say, coins onto the red switch, or maybe try to jam the red switch. As long as the switch is pressed, we will have extra time to get up, but we don't have infinite time. We'd have to make very sure that we are 100% ready as soon as the switch gets depressed, as if we were to, say, jam it or something, jam it into the active position, and we couldn't unjam it, we'd have a bit of problems if we didn't make it on the first try. But keep in mind, everything that we want to bring up to this point, we would have to carry all the way through the level up to this point. So when I say that we're kind of screwed on Bowser, know that I mean that in a holistic way as far as this level is concerned. And bear in mind, if we were to leave anything behind, anything we don't actively have on us when we begin or end a level, okay, we see that everything returns back to normal whenever we enter or exit a portrait. If we, say, had some rations or something that we needed to carry with us, because we need food and water naturally, we would have to carry them with us at all times. Now, we have a carry weight that's going to allow us to do that, but we might have to leave some stuff behind in order to carry some of the extra things, like what I'm going to recommend for Bowser, which would be a sharp, pointy stick, or maybe a makeshift spear of some kind. You can jab at his soft bits, but I really don't know that that would work. It would be such an uphill battle. And assuming even that he only has his moveset that he has right now, it's possible you could go for the heart. I guess I didn't actually dismiss this, but we cannot lift Bowser. This is obvious. It's so obvious that I forgot to say it. But yeah, we wouldn't be able to lift Bowser. Interestingly enough, I noticed something when I was trying to sort of figure out how he might, take care of this fight, and that's that there are only two things in this area that detonate these bombs. You, if you touch them at all, or Bowser specifically if he's thrown. You cannot just lead him over to the bombs and they'll blow up in his face. Logistically, I would assume that if we were actually in this confrontation that Bowser would, stay away from the one thing that can defeat him in the room. Then again, he's a bit arrogant, a little bit overconfident, so maybe he wouldn't. Even if we could defeat Bowser at this point, I mean, things are getting pretty difficult later on. Maybe we could bring like a long stick or something, and then when he does his flame attack, which you're going to want to avoid, obviously, that you don't want to be incinerated. You could maybe light a stick with it, and then if high benefit of the doubt here, if he gets close to a bomb, chuck that torch over there and it might blow the bomb up. Logistically, it would make sense that it would. There aren't any other items in the area to see if they would blow them up, but his fire breath doesn't blow them up, so maybe it's more of an impact sort of thing. If that's the case, then you just throw the stick when he gets close to it. That is the only way that I would see being able to defeat Bowser. Although bear in mind, these are massive bombs, so we'd have to be pretty far away to survive the explosion. And this is where I turn things over to all of you. All of you wonderful people in the comments, which should be liking and subscribing to the video/channel if you're not already. I want to know how all of you would manage this fight. Specifically this fight, and bear in mind, anything you bring outside with you to this combat scenario, you will have to bring all the way through Bowser in the Dark World. So, how would you handle it? But with that in mind, even if we can't defeat Bowser, I have a couple, sneaky little tricks that we might be able to continue the game. But anyway, thank you for watching all the way to the end. It has helped me out an awful lot. Thank you so much to everyone for supporting me on all of the platforms. It means a lot to me, and you make this possible. You're the best. Anyway, I'm Newbornkilik, and I will see you in the next one. I'm out.